Pretty big news to discuss today coming from the Saturday Headline segment on Hockey Night in Canada last night. We got word that Seth Jones won't be signing an extension with the Columbus Blue Jackets. We also have some updates on Jack Eichel, the salary cap remaining flat a lot longer than expected, and we also have some signings and news in Vancouver about former players joining the management group. We got all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. Before we jump into some of the bigger topics, we do have a couple of signings to discuss here today. The Los Angeles Kings have signed an undrafted free agent from the KHL, Vladimir Tkschyov, who is a 5'10", 165-pound winger. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Obviously, it's difficult to pronounce. It kind of looks like Tkachuk, except on the end instead of the uck, it's the eov. So I think that's how he would be pronounced. He's 25 years old. He gets a one-year deal at $925,000. He's been playing over in the KHL for the last 5 or 6 years, putting up some pretty decent numbers. Not to the point where he's like a point-a-game player, but pretty darn close. He had 38 points in 45 games last year. There was reports back earlier last week that the LA Kings were very interested in signing him, and that is now official. So it'll be another interesting prospect to throw into the mix here for next season. The Nashville Predators have signed a 2019 7th-round selection, Juuso Parssinen from Finland. Of course, he's 6'2", 200 pounds. He was a 7th-round pick. You don't often see a lot of them make it to the NHL, so we'll see what he can bring. He's been playing over in Liga, had a good season this past year, putting up 42 points in 55 games. Parssinen plays left wing as well as center, so we could see him maybe make the jump to North America and find his way into the Predators system as early as this coming season. The Vancouver Canucks have also come to terms with top prospect Vasili Podkolzin, who was their first-round selection in the 2019 NHL draft. Now, of course, he gets a standard cap hit, $925,000 on a 3-year deal. Of course, he's been playing over in Russia in the KHL, putting up some pretty solid performances. I think he looks to be a fairly high-end prospect. There is a lot of Schedule A bonuses built in to this contract as well, where he could earn quite substantially more than a $925K. So, of course, depending on how he does, they could have an additional cap hit kick in for his bonuses that he has the ability to earn. But still a big signing by Vancouver and another young dynamic player to add to the mix here as they look to get back on track next season. Now, as I mentioned, we have some more interesting topics here to talk about here today. First up, I want to talk about the salary cap. Now, in the latest 31 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick, just came out a couple days ago, Elliot Friedman's made mention that he's heard from a lot of league executives that the salary cap may actually remain flat for a lot longer than many of us have thought. Coming into this season, where we're kind of trying to see the light of the end of the tunnel here, what post-pandemic NHL is going to look like, many expected the NHL salary cap to remain flat for at least 3, maybe 4 years, but now he's hearing with all the lost revenues and the amount of money that the players are going to owe the owners that it's going to be about 5 years before we see a salary cap increase. That is going to absolutely cripple some of the NHL's top teams, and it's going to probably force some player movement that we might not have seen or expected beyond that. Now, obviously, like I said, if you look at a lot of the teams right now that are near the top and having the most success, a lot of them are right at or near the cap, many of which have young players in ELCs that are going to be needing raises coming soon. Like, look at the Avalanche, for example. They've got some big deals to do. They've got McCarr coming out of his ELC. They've also got Captain Gabriel Landeskog as a UFA. So some big contracts. They're going to have to find ways for that. Even looking at a team like the Maple Leafs, for example, who have a lot of their younger pieces signed longer term, like Matthews and Marner, the cap could still be flat when they're coming due, since they didn't sign too long, especially in the case of Matthews, where he did a 4-year contract. That is going to prove to be difficult. They're already in a situation where Freddie Anderson's likely gone. I know they're likely going to try to keep Zach Hyman if they can. You got Morgan Riley not too far away from free agency. And they're not the only team. That's just a good example. Even Vegas, for example, they're up against the cap too. Tampa obviously has been working around it with LTIR for quite a while, and hard to say how much of an impact this will have on them. But still, a lot of teams are going to be in really tough. Even looking at the teams that are not in cap trouble right now, but that are on the up and up and have a lot of young players that are going to be needing, raises in their second and third contracts coming up here soon. That could even pose issues for some of those teams as well, depending on how they distribute the cash and get all these contracts done. It's certainly going to force a lot of players that are certainly worthy of what the pre-pandemic life was like to take less money, and it's also going to force a lot of player movement, as I mentioned here. So from an entertainment standpoint, if you're a fan and you like to see a little bit more chaos in the NHL, player movement and trades, this very well could have an impact on that, because teams are not going to be able to afford to keep a lot of their young stars as they work their way up and qualify for much more lucrative contracts. So we'll have to be watching this situation closely. It's something that we're not going to know a lot of. It's, obviously as time goes on, the NHL is going to try to remain more creative to find more extra revenue streams. We also know that the US TV deal kicks in next year, so that's going to help some revenue, obviously, and you're obviously going to have more opportunities for potential advertising. Like we saw some small helmet advertisements this season. There could be some, a few other little things like that come through. The NHL is getting more into the gambling and betting game. So, there's more opportunities out there that could change the outlook longer term. It's like anything when it comes to, markets and what things are valued at and how you make money and all that. Things can change in a heartbeat. But right now it's looking like 5 years. That's a long haul for these teams to not be able to spend any more money than they do today. Now, before we go further into the video as well, I just want to take a quick moment here and pause to acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. So thanks very much for watching that sponsored video from Manscaped. I certainly greatly appreciate your support as well as theirs. Now let's jump back into today's video. Of course, we also got word out of the Vancouver Canucks organization after some interviews here with Jim Benning that it does look as though the Sedin twins, Daniel and Henrik, will indeed be joining the Canucks organization. I'm not quite sure exactly what the role is going to be, but I know they had been interviewed before saying that they had a lot of interest in learning the management ropes and how to run a team. And it sounded to me like they had longer term aspirations of maybe being a general manager. Now, of course, where they're twins and they do everything together, could they even be like a co-GM someday? I'm not really sure, but it just seems like they've done everything every step of the way so far. So it'd be interesting if that ever came about. But either way, if they have some sort of role as maybe they're more like assistant GMs, maybe they're I'm not sure they're going to be more in the pro side, scouting side, amateur side. I don't know what exactly they're going to do, but I just hope for their sake and Vancouver's sake that things go better than when we saw Trevor Linden come back to the organization. Things did not go well there. There's a lot of different theories over why things went the way they did, but obviously the Sedins are somebody who's beloved by the organization, beloved by the fans in the city, and I just hope everything goes well so that there's no bitter taste in anybody's mouth and they exit the organization on a sour note like we saw with Linden. Now, as I mentioned as well, we should have some updates soon here on Jack Eichel. On Saturday Headlines, Elliot Friedman was talking about the Eichel situation, the potential trade, what to expect this offseason, and he talked about the fact that the big one right now is that the Jack Eichel rest period, we could call it, that the Sabres had requested is up, and Eichel and the Sabres are expected to meet sometime this week to discuss his health and his situation overall and on how to get him healthy. And I would imagine to some degree they'll have discussions around his future with the franchise as well, because everybody knows that that's certainly a bone of contention and something he's going to be looking to make a decision on sooner rather than later. But obviously after all this rest, we know that he wants to have a surgery that the Sabres kind of are crazy about. The surgery is something that looks like it should be fine, but it's something that doesn't have a ton of history on it, and there's no past precedents of NHL players having the surgery and recovering well enough that the owners and the GM and everybody would be really comfortable with it. We do have other professional athletes that have had this surgery when it comes to the neck and the disc that needs to be repaired or replaced here. But of course, they're different sports, different requirements and all that. So I don't know. But either way, we should get more word here. But I mean, we've had a lot of talk on the exit interviews about between Eichel and Reinhart and Ristolainen, and it just sounds like there could be a mass exodus out of Buffalo this year, and you have to wonder how they're going to go about handling this. There is some people that think that the Sabres should bring in a president of hockey operations or somebody as a advisor type of role who could work with Adams. I mean, this is a daunting task for a brand new general manager who's only been on the job for barely a year. For him to have to move out all these players, it's just not something that I'm not sure he's prepared for, to be completely honest. We saw how things were handled at the deadline. They got a absolutely garbage return for Taylor Hall. We know that the Bruins were one of his preferred teams to go to. So like I said before in other videos, I think the Bruins knew that he only was willing to work with very few teams, so they didn't really need to offer a whole lot more to make the deal happen, so they took advantage of that situation. But Taylor Hall himself has recently revealed that there were other teams in the mix, and he would have considered other teams as well. So I'm not really sure that we can really say that the Sabres had no leverage here. I think they had some and just didn't seem like they used it. So if they end up doing these types of trades with Eichel, Reinhart, Ristolainen, and walk away with underwhelming returns on those players, it's just going to be that much longer before they can be relevant again. So I hope for Jack Eichel's sake that we get a decision here soon. We know what's going to happen. Obviously, he's going to want his health first and foremost, regardless of where he plays. But I think we'll hopefully have some more clarity on that this week and get an idea if indeed he's asked for a trade or how things are going to go in that regard as well. Now, when it comes to Seth Jones, this was the big bombshell on Saturday headlines last night from Elliot Friedman. We had talked about Jones before. If you've been following along with my NHL offseason plan series, I did record already the Columbus Blue Jackets video, which is actually going to be scheduled to go up tomorrow. And I talk a lot about the Jones extension and how that she needs to be their top priority, and how, depending on how that goes and if they will sign him or not, will dictate a lot about the rest of the team's immediate future and how things will go and where they're going to tear things down. They're going to go and make some trades to get better quickly. Like, how are they going to approach this? Because they're kind of in limbo here. And now we have word that Jones is not interested in signing an extension. He was interested in testing free agency. So that's a big blow for Columbus, who already has had a lot of players leave town. Nobody seems to want to stay with the Jackets long term, except for maybe Nick Foligno, who we suspect might go back there as a free agent once the playoffs are done and his time with the Maple Leafs are over. Obviously, the Leafs are likely not going to be able to afford to keep him. And like I said, many feel he's pretty good chance of going back. As long as they want him, I'm sure he'll go back. But still, outside of that, we've seen Bobrovsky leave. We've seen Panarin leave. They brought in a whole bunch of players at the deadline a couple of years ago, like Duchesne, Dzingel, and they're all gone. We saw Patrick Laine be brought in, and Max Domi, and of course, they butted heads with Tortorella. Things didn't really go great on that front, but now Torts is gone too, so you think that those players are in a situation where they'll give it another chance with a new coach and see how it goes before they get to anything like that. At least I would think so. I mean, we don't have any reason to think Laine wants out right now. I'm not going to say that they won't trade Laine, but if they have to trade Jones, and I think that they really will consider this, because the word was before from Friedman that they wanted to know where things stood with Seth Jones because it was such a top priority, and if they were going to end up losing him, they don't want to see another top player leave town for nothing. They can't take that chance yet again. They've lost too many guys with no returns, and Jones is not going to be in a situation where he can pull that off either, based on what we're seeing here. He still has a year left on his contract. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to try to talk to him about signing an extension, but if he doesn't budge on where things are at with him and his camp, then I would think by the time we get a little further into this offseason, around the time of the NHL draft, I would think that there's a pretty good chance a deal like that could be pulled off. Now, what would a Seth Jones trade look like? I would think that that's going to be a good return, but it's going to depend on whether or not he's willing to talk extension with the new team he's going to. If he would do that and sign to stay longer, the return is going to be better, obviously. If he won't do that and still wants to test free agency, regardless of where he's at, then 1 year of Seth Jones is going to diminish the return for Columbus, and it's going to handcuff them in that regard too. They could still possibly get like a first-round pick or maybe a couple of prospects. I think the return would still be decent because 1 year of Seth Jones for a team that's, say, close to but being a cup contender, or it's going to really elevate them, that would be something that to me would make sense, and obviously would be a nice addition. So it's hard to say where. If you look around the NHL, right shot defenseman that can log big minutes like him and be a real horse on your blue line, he would get a lot of interest. Like I mentioned before, like a guy like Matt Dumba, who I think Jones is a higher quality defenseman than Dumba, but he's going to be on the market too, given their expansion draft situation. So, teams that are looking for right shot defensemen are going to have some decent choices out there, and we don't normally get kinds of these players on the market. The Seattle expansion draft is going to create a little bit of havoc that way, and then we get this situation here. So you look around the NHL, there is a fair bit of NHL teams I think would be really interested. So I'm not going to pinpoint teams right now where I think Jones is going to end up to. We can get to that later once we hear a little bit more through the grapevine of who might be wanting to kick tires on this. But I would think that the trade conversations could start pretty much any time now, because like I said, it wasn't led to believe that the Jackets were going to fool around with this and that they were going to take this seriously. So now that we know he won't sign, I'll be quite surprised if he is not traded this offseason. Now, of course, they could, if the offers aren't as good as they want, they could try to wait and do it in season or at the deadline. I guess they're going to have to make a decision and like a risk assessment. And if they feel the offers will be better at the deadline than they would now. I mean, some teams are sometimes willing to pay more for a full season of a player like that, as opposed to just having them as a rental at the deadline. So I would think it'd be better return now, but they'll have to assess that situation and see what they think, and all that's going to be dependent on what their initial conversations are like. So let me know where you think would be a good landing spot for Seth Jones. Do you see Columbus trading him to make sure they don't lose him for nothing? Let me know your comments in the Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. Keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors from all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.